Hey, Carly Weinstein, welcome.
Thank you.
Carly, you were a student of mine many, many years ago at Syracuse University, but you have built a great big career in social media. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Absolutely. Happy to. So I'll start with my first social media job, which was at Hofstra University on Long Island. I came in as the social media manager. And essentially I was the only person managing social. So what that meant was creating the content, scheduling it, sending it out, running analytics, doing campaigns. So your standard social media, right? What you would think a social media manager would be doing. However, it became very apparent very early on that a lot of the content that would perform well on social media, multimedia, video, graphics, were not being created by anybody, right? We didn't have somebody to create that content, short, digestible clips, punchy content. So I took it upon myself to create that content because my job was to elevate the social function at Hofstra. And so because of that, I very quickly grew in my role. And I had quite a few promotions during my time at Hofstra. I was there for 5 years, worked my way all the way up to spearheading the entire multimedia and digital function at Hofstra. So I ended up managing folks who did video, graphics, social, and yeah, really built out the function there at Hofstra. And then after 5 years, 5 wonderful years, I moved over to Stony Brook Medicine, which is where I am now, essentially doing the same thing. I'm building a social function from the ground up, and making some fairly big changes in regards to not only social, but the multimedia space as well.
Right, awesome. So as many of my students are preparing for similar kind of journey post-graduation, can you give advice to somebody who's been there? How can they best prepare to first get the job and second succeed once they get the job?
Absolutely. It's really, really important, as I saw in my first role in social media, to be a content creator, right? So it's not enough to, understand how the different platforms work or to know how to word a post on a different platform. You need to be creating the actual content in multimedia. So you need to know how to do video, even if it's just with your phone. You have to know how to edit video, Adobe Premiere. It's a lot more advanced than iMovie, if anybody still uses that, right? You need to know how to use the software. Motion graphics, very important. Static graphics. So being a content creator is just as important, again, as understanding how to manage social in other respects.
Okay, now a lot of my students will tell you, hey, I have 5,000, 10,000, 30,000 followers on TikTok or Instagram. Is that enough to get the first job?
So it's really impressive, but it's definitely not enough to get a job as a social media manager or a digital strategist. And the reason why is because when you say you have a lot of followers, that makes you an influencer, and an influencer is very different from a digital strategist. And to build on that a little bit further, the difference is, if you're an influencer, right, you have a captive audience and they listen to you, but they listen to you about specific topics, right? So if you're your own brand and you're an influencer, then that's great, right? That will most likely lead to success. But if you're managing social media for an organization, it's only one piece of the puzzle. It tells the organization that you know how to create content, but it doesn't tell the organization that you know how to strategically manage a social media function, that you understand audiences on different platforms. So if you have 20,000 followers on TikTok, then that's great. That your future employer probably understands that you get TikTok, but what about Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram? And although you may not be the target audience anymore for a given platform, it doesn't mean that nobody is, right? And that particular platform that you may not be on may still be important to the organization that you are applying for a job with.
Okay, can we talk about stakeholder a little bit? So at the university, Hofstra, right, you focused on students, prospective students, but you also had a lot of stakeholders who are not on the young people platforms, right? Can you talk about that?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So correct. Current students, prospective students, alumni, young alumni, older alumni. We had faculty, administration. We had the surrounding community when it comes to a university or any organization, really, right? large portion of your social audience is the surrounding community. It's a lot of community building. We had researchers, families, extremely important. Families and parents were a huge part of our social audience. So being able to craft content for each of those audiences on each platform is
so where did you target the older folks?
Yep. So good question. So while I was at Hofstra, typically parents were on Facebook. They had their own Facebook groups. They followed Hofstra on Facebook on the main page. So Facebook was primarily for parents. And then I'll just give some more examples of demographics, right? Current students were obviously Instagram and TikTok at the time. When it came to Twitter, it was a lot of reporters. So that's where we did a lot of our expert pitching, professors. And then it's very important at the end of the day to remember that although you have a majority of stakeholders on each platform, there's a little bit of a mix, right? So even though you're very mindful, for example, that an older demographic may be on Facebook, you can't ignore the other people who are on that platform who may also be part of your audience.
Right. So always a challenge of integrating the different platforms. Right, let's go back to preparation. As the students are sitting here, juniors, seniors, they're about to look for a job. In terms of building their own social media portfolio, do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I would say, let's talk about personal profiles first. So you want to make sure that whatever profiles you're putting out there publicly that are you, you want to make sure that they're professional, but they're real, right? So you don't want, if I'm an employer and I'm looking for to hire somebody and I go to their Twitter account and I see a lot of really formal, boring content, boring, right? I want to hire a real person. So that's going to be very telling of the person that I'm looking to hire. But on the flip side, you don't want it to be unprofessional. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and that goes regardless of the platform. I would say, obviously there are certain profiles that you would keep private. So for example, Facebook, my personal Facebook page is private, but I'm friends with a lot of folks in the industry, right? With colleagues. So although it's private, it's really not private. So just keeping that in mind, that nothing is ever truly private. You've heard it before, nothing is ever truly gone or deleted when you delete something. So be professional and mindful. Moving outside of your personal social platforms, if you have the opportunity to have an internship or even just do something pro bono, building your portfolio in that way, creating content, taking screenshots of the posts that you're creating for an organization. Quite honestly, even if it's, a mom and pop shop or your parents' company or a friend's company, right? Just getting the practice in there, doing people favors even, and because in reality, it's doing you a favor, building your portfolio. And again, you'll have materials ready for when an employer asks if you have samples of social posts that you've done.
Okay. How about certifications? I always encourage my students to get certifications in paid, in analytics. Do you have any recommendations over there?
That is a great question. I would say this isn't necessarily a certification, but even still at the level that I'm at, I am always going through courses on Facebook Blueprint, which I find to be really helpful, in particular because Facebook advertising is increasingly becoming, at least for me, a major part of our social strategy, good, bad, or indifferent. Facebook can certainly be challenging and frustrating given the changes that happen to the algorithm on a daily basis, honestly. So keeping up to date with the blueprint is actually really, really helpful for paid and organic. Whether we like it or not, Facebook is not going away on the professional social media front. So I find that to be really, really helpful.
Okay, fantastic. And final thoughts, Carly. You have a lot of good advice. You have a lot of experience. What advice do you have for my students?
The biggest piece of advice that I have is never stop learning in this industry. I would assume that everybody who's listening probably knows that and understands that already, but I'm just going to reiterate that. Never stop learning. Things are always, always changing. In this industry, I would argue more so than any other industry out there. There are new social platforms that are always coming about. There's new features to every single social platform. The social platforms are competing with each other and they're taking features from each other and they're building upon them. So, you may think you have it all and you have the secret sauce today when managing social, and then tomorrow there's something new and everything goes out the window and your performance may not be what it was yesterday. So you need to be flexible. You need to be able to pivot. You need to learn from your mistakes and from your achievements and successes. And then just building on that, I would say metrics are really important. You need to be measuring what you are doing to understand your failures and your successes. Interpret that data. Don't just gather metrics, look at the numbers and submit them to your superiors. Understand, tell the story about what you're doing, provide an analysis, and just always be willing to learn and grow.
Awesome advice, Carly Weinstein. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.